All right, hello and welcome everybody to our webinar today, our Lunch and Learn. Today, our topic is the Trump accounts. Um, this was part of the big, beautiful bill which passed in July of 2025. And when they passed, it's really a new concept, a new type of account. And I mean, I was telling you about it then, but I told you just like a very, very basics. And I said, there's like a million questions and we have absolutely no answers. Since then, just recently, we've gotten some guidance and we have a little more direction. And actually, in the State of the Union last night, Trump was talking about these. The website has been updated even this week. So we have a lot more meat to discuss and explain so we can start to understand when are these, Trump accounts going to be useful and what are they going to look like. So joining me today is going to be Kevin Berg, senior manager here, and Tanner Stowe from Boyum Wealth Architects. And we are going to get through sort of a whole bunch of stuff. What are these accounts? How do you open them? When can you open them? How do you get them funded? Are employers going to participate? And then look at some of the restrictions about the type of investments you can have. When do you get distributions? There's a unique little gift tax consideration. But then at the end, we're going to compare sort of what are some of these other options you might consider? What are some of the other ways you can save? There's definitely a unique Roth opportunity that we see in these Trump accounts. Of course, there are still some unanswered questions. So we will highlight what those are just so that you know sort of, I mean, we have a lot of answers finally, but there's still some unanswered things which, you'll need to keep an eye on before you sort of move forward with using one of these accounts. So with that in mind, I think Kevin's up first, talking about sort of the basics of what these accounts look like.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. A Trump account is essentially an individual retirement account set up for a child under the age of 18. The intent was kind of to get these kids a jump start on investing, learning about the importance of participating in the markets, and allow them to do that before they're actually having some earned income. As the we're saying, you have to be a child under the age of 18. You have to have a valid social security number. So generally, you're going to be setting this up on behalf of your kids or your grandchildren. There's some ordering rules, but generally, it's going to be the parents setting these accounts up. Um, until the kids turn 18, you have an opportunity to fund it up to $5,000 a year. And then once they turn 18, it becomes essentially a traditional IRA for them. So then they can have the opportunity to make contributions on their own behalf or roll it into other accounts or take distributions as they see fit. Uh, how do we go about opening them? The primary way to open one of these accounts is going to be by filing Form 4547 with your 2025 income tax return or future year's tax return if you're not doing it initially. Um, you also have the opportunity to go out and complete this form on trumpaccounts.gov. This website is live basically as of this week, so you can go out there, provide the information for yourself and for the beneficiary, your kid, and fill out your form, and then you can submit it to the government. Our initial impression is that it was likely a better route to go and wait to file the form with your tax return rather than submit it with the government. But we can provide updates on that as we have more opportunity to see how these things get processed. Um, the thing is, right now, is there's not a super rush to get the initial forms filed. You can't actually fund these until after July 4th, 2026, the 1 year anniversary of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Um, we think even though it's not a complete rush, we do want to get these opened earlier in the year once they're actually available. So we're not rushing about opening these right before year end, and there's worry about the um the account not being open by year end because you cannot fund these after year end like a normal IRA. You have to fund it by December 31st.
Uh, Thank you, Kevin. So my name is Tenor Stowe with Boyum Wealth Architects. And just a quick disclaimer, it's for educational purposes only. It's not investment recommendations, financial planning advice. And the opinions are of mine and may not reflect Boyum Wealth Architects' broader opinions. But so first, how to fund one. So I think we've all heard about the $1,000 from the government. So that's the main way that a lot of people get these funded is if you have a child born between 2025 and 2028, you have to claim it. You have to open the account and claim it, but you'll get $1,000 pilot funding from the government. Um, Beyond that, starting in 2026, this year in 2027, you'll be able to contribute $5,000 per kid. That can come from parents, grandparents, other beneficiary, other individuals. There's a list of there. Can come from employer contributions. Can actually come through employer salary reductions, and even charitable organizations like the Dell Foundation, where they contributed to allow even kids beyond the kids born in 25 to 28 to get funding in there. But once you open the account, that's when you'll be able to get funded, but it will not be able to be funded before July 4th, 2026, which I believe is a Saturday. So we're really looking at July 6th as the starting point for really getting these funded. But like Kevin said, it does have to be before the end of the year. We do not have until mid-April of next year to fund them for 2026. That's one of the big things to remember. When it comes to the employer contributions, so the employer can contribute up to $2,500 as part of a formal employee benefit, but then that would only go to employees that do have a qualifying child to have a Trump account open. So a kid 1 through 0 through 17, essentially. Other employees would get 0. So it'll be interesting to see if employers actually pick up on this or if it is something they even want to do. There we go. And then another way that employers can kind of help at least or facilitate this is they can set up a salary deferral program for employees, where you could actually do, from the looks of it, tax deferred money into the Trump account and then get a tax deduction for this year. We'll see how that actually gets worked out and if employers actually set that up, and then how that would affect other benefits down the road with tracking, basis and things like that.
For my money, I think the salary deferral thing is going to be way more common than the $2,500, because like we've got some great people here that don't have kids or their kids are 25 years old. Are we really going to choose to give $2,500 to the people with just having kids now versus the people who have a 20-year-old kid? I'm not sure we're going to throw around $2,500 like that. So I think some companies might do that, but I think that salary deferral program, it could look a lot more like a pre-tax daycare program where the company is facilitating it. They have the program, but it's not costing the employer any money. So I think that could be, a lot more common in practice, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not beneficial to employees that don't have kids. And so obviously there's some benefits that don't always affect everybody, but yeah, the employee deferral seems like it could be a likely option. So then once you actually get the money contributed, what can they be invested in? So we're still trying to learn exactly what this looks like, but the general idea is it's going to be a low cost index fund tracking a broad-based US stock index. Right now that could be looking like a VOO or an SPY, which are S&P 500 index funds, or something like VTI, which is a broader total US stock market fund. So it'll be interesting to see what they actually come out with, if they use current ETFs or mutual funds that are on the market, or if they create new ones. And one thing that we'll touch on a little bit is that, eventually it looks like these accounts will be able to be held at different custodians, like a Schwab, a Vanguard, or a Fidelity. So we don't know yet if they're all going to have to use the same investment or if they'll set up their own, Trump version or one that qualifies for the guidelines. A couple things with it: there cannot be any leveraged funds. The annual fees have to be capped at 0.1%. And then you can see the list of things it's not going to invest in, like crypto, international, individual stocks. It's not going to be left as cash, money market. It's not going to be in treasuries, annuities, commodities. It's really designed specifically to go into whether it's an ETF or mutual fund, index fund, specifically for just US stock investments. And then lastly, on when can they get distributed? So this is where it's very strict. So there are no withdrawals during what they call the growth period. So before the kid turns 18, there are no withdrawals allowed, except in the case of a death or mainly going to a qualified ABLE account rollover when they're 17. You can transfer between custodians once we learn more about what that looks like, but you cannot take money out of the accounts before the child turns 18, except for those two cases from what we see. And then once the child turns 18, that's where it acts very similar to an IRA account. And so after 18, if they do take out the basis, the contributions that were not tax deductible, that would be tax free. Any earnings or growth on it would come out as ordinary income plus a 10% penalty, similar to the IRA rules currently. There are some exceptions that are related to current IRA rule exceptions, which would be for higher education expenses and first-time homebuyer expenses. You would still pay taxes on the growth, but you would not pay the 10% penalty as long as you're under those exceptions. And then once you're 59 and a half, that's where then there would be no penalty for withdrawals. It would be taxable, or it would be income tax on the growth. I think over to you, Chris.
So one of the somewhat unanswered questions is about the gift tax. So I don't need to get into like a 3-hour discussion of this, but I will just say there's a little bit of murkiness. So the question is, do you need to file a gift tax return for contributions that you make, as the parent into the Trump account? And the real question there is are the contributions considered a present interest gift? Our view is that generally, yes, they should be. Our view is that generally, yes, the annual exclusion should apply to these contributions. And as a result, we will not file a 709 gift tax return unless some contrary guidance comes out. So right now, I think there's a little bit of guidance which could clarify this from the IRS. The IRS could put out an announcement and be like, yes, we agree that these Trump account contributions are eligible for the annual exclusion. And so when you put $5,000 in the account, you do not have to file a gift tax return for that. I think that would ease a lot of minds. It's very similar. They're structurally very similar to 529 plan contributions. And that is how the rules apply to 529 plan contributions, where the annual exclusion takes care of it. You do not need to file a gift tax return. So I would say if you are in a position where you've made taxable gifts and you've used up your entire exemption, maybe this is a slightly different conversation, but I think some guidance could come along and just make this issue go away entirely. Hopefully that happens, but that's generally our view of these and how we're going to approach gift tax returns, which is that we're not going to file gift tax returns. So we wanted to compare a few of these different accounts. So we've got the Trump accounts, we've got the 529 plans, and we've got Roth IRAs. And so the contribution rules are different for each of these. The Trump account, you're going to get that $1,000, free potentially if you have a child born during that time. And then there's a $5,000 annual limit on contributions, but it doesn't matter what your income is. It has nothing to do with your income. 529 plan, we've got this $19,000 annual exclusion. You can contribute that much and not have to file a gift tax return. Again, this has nothing to do with income. And then the Roth IRA, it's $7,500, but it's limited to your earned income. So I have got a 3 and 1-year-old at home. They do not make any money. They cannot contribute to a Roth IRA. But I could put $5,000 in a Trump account for them this year. and I could put, $19,000 in a 529 plan if I wanted, but my kids do not have Roth IRAs today because they don't have any earnings. Certainly when they are, in high school and they're getting older and they're working summer jobs or whatever, they might have some earnings. So if you have, $4,200 of wages for the year, then you can contribute $4,200 to the Roth IRA. The withdrawal rules are going to be somewhat similar and a little bit different on these. So the Trump account, as Tenor was saying, no, zero distributions before they are age 18. After that, very similar to traditional IRA rules. 529 plans, they can be used for K-12 education costs, higher education costs, professional accreditation costs. So that has a very wide scope. And, my 3-year-old, if she goes to private school, I could use it for kindergarten tuition, up to grad school tuition, up to paying for her to get the CPA exam, 20 years from now or whatever. Roth IRAs, those distributions come out basis first. They're available at any time. So the taxability basis is going to be free in all of these situations. In the Trump account, the earnings are going to be ordinary income plus 10% penalty, unless an exception applies. 529 plan, the same thing. The earnings are ordinary plus a 10% penalty, unless the exception applies. The exception is going to be education costs for the 529 plan. Similar for the Roth IRA. The earnings are going to be ordinary plus the 10% penalty, unless an exception applies. So there's these other sort of considerations to keep in mind. The restrictive investment rules for Trump accounts. That doesn't exist for these other type of accounts. I think the tracking of contributions, the source of the contributions, that is very important for these Trump accounts, in a way that it isn't for these other ones. A Trump account might have contributions from 3 or 4 different sources. You're going to have to track all that separately. 529 plan, it tracks your basis for you. It's very easy. You really don't have to worry about it. Roth IRA, there's only basis coming from one thing. You should track your basis, but it's only one bucket. It's a lot simpler. Charitable contributions, they can make contributions to Trump accounts. That's a little bit unusual. 529 plans, you can modify the beneficiaries. So I've got 2 kids. I don't have to worry about, oh, do I have an equal amount in each of the kids' accounts, right? They're both gonna, who knows, they're 3 years old. Maybe they go to college someday. I don't know what college is going to cost. Maybe one goes to an expensive college, one goes to a cheap college. And so having an equal amount in the 2 accounts isn't necessary, because you can change the beneficiary without creating any hassle. So if the first one goes to college, gets a full ride, great. The costs are going to be a lot less. I can change the beneficiary to my other child, not a problem. And then the Roth IRA, the key thing there is you've got to have earned income in order to make contributions. So that's unique. But then the potential for these backdoor Roth contributions later in life, I think is tremendously useful to consider. So there's a lot of different ways you can save, right? And so I'm working, I'm a parent, I've got kids, I'm thinking about saving for myself, saving for the kids. This is kind of the order. Every situation is a little bit different, obviously, but I think this is a pretty good order that you would consider doing them. So you're going to have your own retirement accounts. You really want to get the employer match on that. That's free money. Free money is the best kind of money. But using those retirement accounts for your own deferrals. You can have retirement accounts outside of that. So that'd be like your personal IRA or Roth IRA. Health savings accounts. If you have a high deductible health insurance plan, that can be a great way to save money. Maybe you use it, right away for medical costs. Maybe you're using it more as an investment for long term. You could save money in a taxable brokerage account. You could set aside money in a 529 plan for the kids. You could have UTMA accounts for the children. You could have ABLE accounts if you have kids that would benefit from that. Now we've got the Trump account sort of thrown in there. You could have a trust for the benefit of the child, irrevocable. There's lots of different variations of trust that you can set up. But I think sort of the best comparison for these Trump accounts is more of a irrevocable trust where the beneficiary has full rights to all of the money at age 18. The money is totally locked up until they get to 18. And that is a very unique feature of the Trump accounts, unique in a bad way. All of these other ones, you can get the money back out if something happens or there's hardship withdrawals, and like you could get it out of an IRA. Yeah, there might be some tax and some penalty, but it's not locked up for eternity. In these Trump accounts, it really is locked up, and you're not getting it out of there unless the child dies or you roll it into an able account. Like that's really locked up in a way that doesn't apply to any of these other things. So in my mind, if you're the parent, I don't know, the Trump account might be the eighth, ninth, 10th thing on the hit list of like good ideas and in what order I should do it. But that's not always the same for everybody. Tenor, like if you were a grandparent, how would you look at this differently?
Yeah, and I think, Chris, that's a good point. Everybody does have a different situation. Um, and whether it's you as the parent and, saving for my kids, or yeah, you're the grandparent. So I think a good example with grandparents is, if they're already retired, say you're a grandparent that is retired and you have, enough savings, you're not worried about covering your own expenses, and you're, looking at ways to give to your grandchildren. Even if you're, worried about, well, I don't want to give all the money to my kids, it's an inheritance. I want to get it to my grandkids. Well, then, yeah, you skip all those first five options. You're not going into 401ks or IRAs. And that's where, if it's education focused, probably using a 529 plan is still a good option because of all the extra flexibility. But you might have already funded those, or they might already be funded up to the point where you need them to. Um, then you could look at like UTMA accounts. If you want the more access to the accounts for when the child turns, 18 or 21 in some states, then that's a good option. Or if you want them to really use it for buying a house or something other than education or just buying a car, if you want the flexibility for them to choose it, we'd look at a UTMA account. And then after that, that's where the Trump accounts really come into play. Is if you've got the 529s funded, maybe you don't want them to have the flexibility of the UTMA account. You don't want them to have full access, just buy a car, blow it on a vacation, whatever. Then that's where the Trump accounts could come into effect, where could it be used for education expenses without a penalty? Yes, but you're still paying taxes. Could it be used for a first-time home buyer? Yes, but you're still paying some income tax on it. But it's still, if you're really, you've got those other things figured out and you're really trying to set them up for that long term, for that retirement savings, for it to be used when they're 65, that's where the Trump accounts come into play. And then, if I'm a parent thinking about it too, a lot of time when I'm working with individuals and couples, we want, you put your mask on first. Plane's going down, put your oxygen mask on first. You need to get your savings figured out or your debt paid down, or, and whether it's your 401k, well, it's also, yeah, do you have debt you're needing to get paid off? Do you have home expenses you're saving up for? There's a lot of other things that might need to be focused on before the Trump accounts come into play. And so really figuring out, well, what is the purpose of the money for my kid? What could be the purpose for me if I need it? Really like breaking all that down is key. And everybody's got a different situation, but there's a lot of considerations before you just dump the money into there. To Chris's point, for
Yeah.
18 years.
Yeah, I think the last question here, can you afford to give up 100% of the rights to this money until the child is 18? And if you answer like, or maybe, then I don't think you want to be putting it in a Trump account. And if you answer yes, definitely, then I think you can, proceed. Kevin, I think if you are going to proceed, some of these Roth opportunities are some of the unique perks. of the Trump account. And if you've sort of gotten past all of the thought process and now you're at like, yeah, I am going to fund this thing, then I think this Roth opportunity is a pretty cool one. So let's walk through that.
Absolutely, Chris. So, as you were saying, it's not the best tool for saving for education. It's not the best tool necessary to give them opportunity to buy a house. But this is a fantastic opportunity to supercharge a Roth account for your kids much in the future retirement. Um, Up until the age of 18, the child is eligible both for the Trump account contribution of $5,000 a year, and if they're working and they earn up to at least $7,500, they can fully fund a Roth IRA for the year. So, 5,000 a year up till the kid starts working, 12,500 up until they're 18 and working. And then once the child turns 18, the Trump account becomes eligible to be rolled into a Roth IRA. And at that point, you have a Roth IRA that can grow up until the child's retirement age of, 59 and a half, 65, whatever that happens to be. Um, so we have some simple illustrations of how this could work out. Um, have a kid that's age 10 for the next 7 years, 8 years, we're going to put in $5,000 a year. So we contribute a total of $40,000. Um, this will grow up to $58,000 roughly at the time the child turns 18 and is eligible to roll into a Roth IRA. We will convert it in a taxable conversion, pay tax on $18,000, but because of standard deductions, we're likely going to pay roughly zero tax on this. So now we have a $58,000 Roth account that is going to grow for the rest of the kid's working career, and we're going to have a fairly wealthy, 60-year-old with 1.5 million that's totally tax free in the future. So that's great, and that's if we're just doing 8 years of contributions starting at age 10. We can have even larger opportunities if we're starting with a kid who's just born this year. This is the kid that's getting really getting that opportunity to participate in the markets that Trump was talking about last night. We get them started up at age 1. They get their 5,000 a year contribution up until the age of 17. They get the 1,000 free dollars from the government. By the time they turn 18, we're going to have roughly $185,000. Um, this is the part where this requires a little bit of planning as well, because we're going to actually have a tax liability when we convert this at the age of 18. We're going to have roughly $100,000 of growth, which could be $14,000 of taxes. So that's the actual additional cash out of pocket that we're going to need to have available at the time this child turns 18. But once we do that, we have got a very healthy retirement balance at 185,000 at the age of 18, which sets them up to have, tens of, potentially $10 million. The TrumpAccounts.gov website likes to show us $13 million, but there's this can put them in a really good spot for a healthy retirement by getting them started early. And that's really what they're trying to encourage is showing the long-term opportunities of investing. So this
Yeah,
is this is where we see the real opportunity.
absolutely. If you're gonna do this, like there can be some benefit to that initial like making the contributions, like that's fine. But you're gonna pay off that benefit in a big way by converting it to the Roth IRA at age 18. I don't know that many 18-year-olds that have very high income. If they're going to college or doing what, like their income is not going to be high. It'll be as low as it ever is going to be at age 18. So they will pay a small amount of tax at age 18. And now you've got all this money in a Roth IRA, which, as we've established, is far preferable to having it in a Trump account because of the way the rules and the basis and getting it back out of there. You'd much rather have it in a Roth IRA, and you can get it there, but you have to wait until they are 18 in order to get it switched over. Um, So there's a few outstanding questions. I think one of them, a key one, is sort of when will these accounts be transferable to your preferred brokerage, right? Or when can you set them up directly? So it is not super attractive, the idea that like I'm going to go set this up with the Department of Treasury and now I got a separate login and I got to keep track of this account that's living at the Department of Treasury, I guess. Um, I have all of my accounts at Schwab. I just want one more account at Schwab. Schwab is, I can't speak for Schwab. We don't speak for Schwab. I think Schwab is going to offer these. Is it going to be on July 4th or July 6th or September 1st? At what point is Schwab going to have the ability to open these accounts themselves? Because that will cut out the Department of Treasury being the middleman, and I think that will be far preferred. So we don't have the answer to that. As Tenor was talking about some of these restrictions on qualified investments, like what does that look like specifically? Is there going to be a special, Trump ETF ticker that's, the US stock market, or are they going to just use these existing ones? So I think there's some questions there. I think we understand the general framework, but some of the details are missing. Cash is not one of the allowable investments. You literally cannot put in $5,000 and just let this sit in a money market account. So how is that going to be facilitated by Schwab and Vanguard and Fidelity? Are they going to auto enroll you into one of these qualifying ETFs? Are they going to automatically then reinvest the dividends? Um, you know, at what point is having cash in the account breaking the rules? And then what is the consequence for breaking the rules if you even do break the rules? I'm not sure. I'm hopeful we will get a little clarification on the gift tax thing. But I think our approach is a very reasonable approach, that we don't need to, I don't think, go crazy filing gift tax returns for all these things. I'm optimistic we'll get an answer before the funding actually starts to happen. These are called Trump accounts. What happens when he's not the president anymore? I don't know. Are they going to be modified in some way? Are they just going to try and like fold them up and just put them into IRAs? Like, I'm not sure what happens, whether there's a Republican or a Democrat president next. Can you really see the next president having a thing called a Trump account? I don't know, maybe. Um, and just what I'm not sure what we will see going forward with these charitable contributions getting involved. So charitable organizations, they can contribute to these. Like the Dell Foundation is contributing and they set their own rules around, you got to be kind of medium or low income. But you could see charitable contributions making charitable organizations making contributions for like their local community. I think it'll be interesting to see how much of that money exists, because that can go towards your 5,000 funding. So I think there's a lot of these are questions, but I think these are the smaller questions. I think we've gotten enough answers that you can start to plan and figure out, hey, am I going to use this account for my kids? So I'll put Kevin on the spot. He's got kids. Kevin, are you gonna set one of these up for your kids?
Chris, that's actually a great question. And I think to keep in mind, my answer is I'm really relying on the goal of this account for my kids is going to get that money into a Roth IRA. I have two children. I have a 15-year-old who is planning about getting a part-time job, and I was thinking if she gets this job, I'm going to fund her Roth IRA. I would cut the Trump account out of the middleman for that daughter. But if I want to be fair to my youngest daughter who's 9, she can't start working yet. Well, let's hope she can't start working yet. Um, so if I was gonna make a contribution to my oldest daughter's Roth IRA, I would open a Trump account to do a matching contribution, and then at the age of 18, plan on converting that.
Hmm. Interesting. So it's it's an interesting thought, and certainly like the 15-year-old, the time horizon is not as long. I've got like an 18-month-old and an almost 4-year-old at home. And I've thought about this a fair amount for the last, 7, 8 months. I think I've um I think I've gone through the other accounts and I have a pretty good handle on the other savings, and like we have 529 plans. I think a 529 plan is far superior in my own situation. So I think I have enough funding in there that I am considering, and I think I probably will fund one of these for both of my kids, um, with a caveat. So I would say I am not in a rush to do this. It's only February. Today, I think I would say I'm like 90% gonna do this for my kids. Um, but I'm not going to do it until I can set it up directly with the brokerage, right? I do not want a Department of Treasury account. And if it takes until November for the brokerages to sort of allow for this, I'm waiting until November. I don't want to wait until December 30th and try and get all this done in 48 hours before the end of the calendar year. But I'm definitely not going to be the first person to set up a Trump account at my brokerage. Um, I do not want to be doing this in July. New programs roll out. There's going to be kinks. There's going to be a mess getting these things set up. Like it's going to be a nightmare probably in July. Let other people go first. I will not be the first to the party, but I think I probably will get there before the end of the year. And for me, that's because I feel pretty good about the balances I've already got in the 529 plan. And so I think I can afford to have this money locked up absolutely in a black box until they turn 18. That's a long time from now. Um, and that's the leap that I think I'm willing to make. But ask me again the day before I fund it. I've reserved the right to change my mind. Um, if there are any other questions, people can put them in the chat or the Q&A. Certainly happy to talk about any of those. But as we get to wrap up, I don't know, Tenor, do you have a final thought, or like what's your takeaway for the
I think,
presentation today?
yeah, I think I mean, they're definitely interesting. And like Chris, you just said, if you have some of the other boxes checked, it could make sense as another funding option for your kids. So I think really going back and looking at your own, kind of financial order of operations of, do you have everything else taken care of first? Do you check the box on not needing the money? Do you check the box on your own retirement savings? If you've got those things figured out, this could be a good option. And it's also not, it doesn't mean that because you started today, you have to fund it for the next 17 years if you have a 1 year old. Yes, it's a final decision on if you put $1,000 in, you're not getting that back, but it's not a decision that, oh, now we have to continue to always fund it. So I think you do have flexibility there with the funding. You don't have to continue if you set it up and decide to make other decisions. And it'll be interesting to see as we roll out to different custodians, see how it's implemented, to see what the investment decisions are, if any new tax information comes out, and to really see how they're utilized. And back to your point, Chris, on if they last for the next couple decades, or if something changes in a few years and they kind of fade away. I think that'll be really interesting to watch.
Final thoughts from Kevin?
I agree. I mean, I really am excited for the Roth opportunity. I think that's the whole point of this presentation was to point where this is the ideal tool for, and I think that is it's for setting up kids for a solid retirement future. It isn't the primary tool for funding education. It's not the primary tool for transferring money, help them buy a house. But if you wanted to help them set up for a very secure retirement, this is a great tool.
Yeah, I think I would wrap up and conclude and say if if you are going to make a contribution to a Trump account for your kids, grandkids, whatever, um, I think you first need to have a full and complete financial plan put together for your life. You have got to be willing to understand the unique risks of this, where the money is just not available at all. And I think if you have the full, complete financial picture together, you have your full financial plan put together, then it can make a lot of sense with the Roth conversion piece. Without the Roth conversion piece, honestly, I don't think it would, I don't think I'd be doing it. So that is definitely the most attractive part of the whole thing. Um, so if you have the full financial plan put together and you are confident that you can lock up this money until the child turns 18, and then you're willing to convert it and turn it over to the kid in a Roth IRA format at age 18, um, then I think it makes some sense. And if not, I would be very cautious and like do your financial planning first, right? Talk to Tenor, figure out what your whole financial plan is. That seems like the priority, and this is one of the tools you might use to do that. So I do not see any questions in the Q&A. So with that, we will call it a day. As more guidance comes out, feel free to reach out to any of us. Happy to talk about it, but thanks for tuning in, guys.